Adrienne Evans is a nationally and internationally acclaimed social justice leader and pioneer of a groundbreaking rural strategy to strengthen the pro-democracy movement. As executive director of United Vision for Idaho, she has spent over 15 years building the state's only multi-issue progressive network. Ensuring rural and conservative communities are central to advancing equity and justice. In response to rising authoritarianism, Evans launched the United Visions Project in 2020, developing innovative models such as authentic relational communication and authentic relational organizing. These prioritize deep listening, empathy, trust building, and over transactional outreach. Her work has reached over 1.4 million people across 12 states, generating over 107,000 transformative conversations that bridge divides even in the most polarized communities. A global leader in relational organizing, Evans demonstrates how inclusive, multiracial, and multi-class movements can unite rural and working class voices to build a resilient, pro-democracy future. Adrienne also has a really strong connection to our center. She helped create our Spiral of Injustice, if you are aware of that. So I am so honored to welcome Adrienne Evans tonight. Please give her a warm welcome with me.
Thank you, Jocelyn.
Yeah, thank you.
And thanks to the center. I'm sure I've known many of you for a long time, and some of you know UVI. You certainly know the Wassmuth Center. It hadn't really occurred to me, but I thought maybe I would start by just sharing a little bit of that context and history. So, any of you remember Amy Hertzfeld? Yeah, so Amy was the executive director of the center before Dan Prinzing. And now we are in a new generation, which is so exciting and thrilling to see every single day. But during my time, we were working on building the Spiral of Injustice. And that really came from taking old models and reworking them to try and figure out how do we create teaching models that we could use throughout the state to engage people at various levels and give people an opportunity to recognize injustice that often seems invisible. And I was just sharing that it was actually Amy who called me and said, hey, we have a program for people who are working on fighting authoritarianism across the country, and we want you to be a part of this cohort. And so it was that time that I joined this group through Western State Center, and the first trip that we took was to Poland. And I have always been running United Vision for Idaho, but also spent 6 years at the center doing their outreach training. And it was this moment where I was standing in Auschwitz, and the tour guide said, I know who you all are, 27 of us from all over the world. And I was standing at the juncture of where the guard would determine whether you went to the gas chamber or the work camp. And he began speaking about Charlottesville. And he said, I need you all to be here and look and listen and learn, because it's happening again. And the world is watching, and they're watching you in the US. And we need you to go home and fix it. And I still get chills every time I recall that. But it was that moment that I came back and I was talking with Dan, and I said, Dan, I have to direct all of my energy into this. And it's part of how UVI developed another level of training. We've been in the state for 30 years. I've been the executive director for the past 15, 16 years. And we've always been a multi-issue network, because we believe that all of our issues are interconnected, and the more we silo them and divorce them and don't make broader context, the more we're weakening our ability to build as a people for the kind of democracy that we need. And I really suck at slides, so I'm going to reference a few of them, but I'm going to just talk to you if that's okay. And so, We launched a program in around 2015, 2016 called Rise Up Idaho. And we started going out to areas of the state where we were seeing an increased escalation of anti-Muslim, anti-Semitic rhetoric. Hate groups were spreading from North Idaho, as many of you probably know. We've more than doubled over the last seven years or so. And we wanted to go talk to those people. And so we went out with one question: what hurts? What would make a difference for you, your family, and that of your community? And we started recording what people said. And it was stunning, because what they said, divorced from the labels of any political party, read wildly liberal. And so we started creating people's platforms. And by the end of it, we had a list of 25 issues. I mean, it was everything from universal health care to native sovereignty, to housing, to fair taxation, to real democratic representation. And then we have a C4 as well, United Action for Idaho. And the community said, so we want to put out questionnaires to the people who are running. Every state seat was up at the time in the 2016 election. And it was a 13-page questionnaire. And everyone was very, very angry with me. Democrats, Republicans, didn't matter. It's a 13-page questionnaire. How do you expect us to fill this out during an election? And I said, the expectation is probably that you won't. Because many of these people feel like they've been so unseen and unheard and not listened to for decades. So we'll just simply publish the names of those who refuse to answer. And suddenly we were flooded, right? And the communities themselves said, our stipulation is that you can only deviate by the platform by 1 point. Doesn't matter which one it is, but only one. And you have to agree to co-governance, meaning you have to meet with us 4 times a year and hear what's going on. You have to consider us before you sponsor or create legislation that will directly impact our communities. And I'm proud to say that in that year, 6 of those candidates, we endorsed 13, 6 of those candidates won their elections. And it was really incredible. And then came COVID. And the entire movement ecosphere was just really grappling with what do we do? How do we reach people that we know we have to reach with everything coming up and everything that's at stake? And so I had been talking to somebody who had a digital program, texting program. And I'm like, let's try it. Let's just try. So we reached in that year 1.4 million Idahoans. And at that time, the state was 1.87, I believe, right? So the vast majority. And it was still the question of what hurts. What would make a difference for you, your family, and that of your community? And how are you doing? And we were flooded with volunteers who, we've always been a volunteer operation. It's only been recently that we've even had staff, paid staff besides myself. And so we ended up having 789,000 conversations. Now, think of this, it's very different. I really wanted to create a program that wasn't like the regular text you get on a phone. So you get this text about how are you and your family doing? And then you're coupled with a human being. And you're coupled throughout the duration of your conversation. So those went on for days and weeks at a time. And people were talking about their struggles, and they were finding ways to get engaged. And at a time where we couldn't reach each other, in person. And over that period of time of 9 months of outreach, less than 1% of the folks that we were texting opted out. And it blew everybody's minds in the organizing world, because for one of the first times anyone had considered how authentic organizing could also be combined with digital technology. Now, there are a lot of barriers that are facing us when we do rural outreach. One, states like ours, rural conservative places represent 20% of the country. Yet less than 7% of philanthropic dollars, which may be generous to even say 7%, ever reach us. And we know, I don't think I need to tell you, the deep, deep, deep investment that has been made by those on the far right. ALEC, Heritage Foundation, literally no one in that building, or very few, ever write their own legislation. I'll never forget asking a senator at one time, hey, I've got this bill. We were writing bills. We'd been for a long time, tried to get the minimum wage raised for many, many years. But I had an idea about a bill to write, and they said, we don't write bills. We're dentists. We're ranchers. We don't know how to write bills. And so it's very clear how this has been happening in Idaho and other places for a very long time. And my work, I've always felt, was trying to sound the alarm to the broader social justice movement and also to unite communities like ours across the country, because we are in a really shared struggle. And yet we're not given the resources or the amplification to be able to do the work that would inspire people to come here and invest money here and allow us to do the organizing that we're more than equipped to do, but just aren't resourced to do. So in 2020, I was just watching the election results come in. And it wasn't surprising. I've never been surprised by anything that's happening on the national stage, but it's still disheartening, right? And especially so in this last year. That 74 or 75 million people voted for the same horrors that we had just experienced in the last 4 years. What are we missing? What are we missing? And how could UVI be instrumental in telling that story? And so with the success of the texting program, we decided that we were going to readjust a bit. But this time, we were going to reach out to people like the people that probably many of us encounter every time we leave our homes. People who are living in areas where the dominant narrative is being controlled by extremist and authoritarian influencers, with little alternative. You all watch, well, maybe you don't, maybe you're smart enough to not do this, but even the news, our local news, right? It's very clear that there is a message and an agenda that's being projected, and it excludes many of our voices, right? Often. That kind of erasure has deep, deep implications in how cultures and societies are formed. And it is our belief that those cultural and social conditions are the precursors for our political behavior. And if we don't learn how to repair those, we won't get the political outcomes that we want. So this time we retailored the program. How we do it is we use Southern Poverty Law Center's hate mapping. And we identify areas around the country who are experiencing acceleration of authoritarian efforts and violence. And then I get on, because we are national, we've always been a national conduit for Idaho to the broader social justice movement. I get on phone calls with local organizers and say, tell me what's real. Where are you not sending your folks to have conversations? Where does it feel scary? And where are just your off limits? And they provide us with counties and zip codes. From there, we use, I did not know that at the time that this was a thing, but it is, predictive scoring that traces people who self-identify as ethnic nationalists as 70% and above, right? So that's who we talk to. But the we talk to is our progressive base. So people who are left-leaning and progressive, we teach them how to have these kind of conversations and dialogue to navigate complexities. And I will tell you that much of that has been learned through having these conversations as an organizer myself, living in this state, and being on people's doors with people who did not agree with me, and often in times that felt a little scary, right? But I think our country is really grappling. Maybe I'll ask you, because there's never an audience that I talk to where I ask, Has this kind of polarization, political polarization, caused you to become alienated from your family members, friends, neighbors, your sense of community? Anybody feel that? Right? And that starts to erode the social fabric, which is essential for us to be able to vision and build a new future that we deserve, all of us. So it has been 5 years doing this work, and it's been astounding. People stay on the phone on the text threads. The question this time is: our country may be more divided than it's ever been. What do you think is causing this? And it's a very sophisticated program, because one of the things that I really wanted to do was, I've been out here like, hey, do you not see? Do you not see? And so this was a way to actually provide data and say, even though we are cast, Idahoans are cast as red, rural, and racist, maybe they talk about potatoes, but it's usually that. We have a hell of a lot more in common with places like Georgia, North Carolina, and others who are written off uniformly in the same way. What is it going to take to wake us up to the realities that we have been living for decades and decades, if not generations? So we apply 200 data points based on, and this is also different. So it's not a poll, it's not a survey. We don't record anything that isn't self-declared by the person that we're talking to in a conversation. So imagine that prior to this, the only way that you would ever get that kind of information would be, excuse me, to infiltrate a group. And then even then, you're reliant on secondhand interpretation. This is not. This comes directly from what people say. So the way we do this, every conversation is reviewed, 200 data points. We trace social and political identity, biases, perceived greatest threats, perceived greatest risks. I'm forgetting one. Trusted source of information, and pain points. And what we've been able to gather is a really groundbreaking sort of profile, I would say, I guess, of what it is that is actually driving political behavior and causing such deep division in the country. And it's not what we think. It's not what we think. I may turn to a couple of slides here just to show you. And we can make all of this available, I think, to you, so you have it. All right. So we've been to 12 states. I knew it was never enough for it to just be Idaho. We would be dismissed if it was just an Idaho finding. So we've gone to 12 states. We're adding 2 more. The next 2 will be pockets of California. They're experiencing an intense rise, particularly in Orange County and Florida. And so here's where we've been so far: Oregon, Idaho, Arizona, Colorado, Texas, Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, North Carolina, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and New York. And here are data points. So let me show you. It's not different. For anywhere we go, it's not different. People are saying exactly the same thing. And if you notice here, I know it's a little small, but it's this ideology of us versus them, right? That we are in a group, in a camp full of people who believe in us, and everyone who doesn't belong to that group is opposing us. What we don't find is, so how many of you have heard, so everybody, gas prices are rising, cost of food is rising, and everyone's saying this is going to be the game breaker, because that's where people make their decisions. When they feel that, that's how they make their decisions about how they vote. And what I'm going to show you is that that may not actually be the case. So out of all of these states, what we see is that 57.8% of folks say the primary things that are dividing our country, the thing that they are opposed to, is the opposition. It's rooted in ideology, in belonging, and in group association. Now, people do talk about pain points. They do talk about healthcare and rising costs. They do talk about those things, but only 8.6% say that that is the primary political motivator for their decisions on how they vote. So, we can also track over time. Yeah, please.
So is that suggesting that people are saying they feel they belong more to a particular party versus it's afraid of another one? Or
So it's kind of all tied together, especially in places where there has not been a lot of activism or organizing. People don't see an alternative. And we have been out-organized, frankly, by authoritarianism, efforts that span 30, 40, 50 years that have invested billions and billions of dollars into doing work here. And so when you're trying to make sense out of a changing world, if that is the thing that's being offered you, because people come, one of the primary ways that authoritarians organize is they offer mutual aid. So this deep understanding of who's for me, right? Who's going to be there and actually support me in the moments that I'm hurting the most? And when we, as progressive folks, are not there, it speaks volumes, right? And so there's an alignment with identity. Identity is wrapped up in the conspiracy, in all the rhetoric, right? But it's wrapped up in the group association.
because they've been helped.
They've been helped. And quite frankly,
Makes sense.
yeah, it does make sense, right? Maybe you can think about some of your family members that, God, I don't want to talk to them about politics, but I really love Uncle Bill, right? That's the thing that's hardest to break. It is not the ideology. It is not the ideas that surround it. It is not cutting through the rhetoric. It is, but I don't believe you're for me because I've been living in a world that tells me that you're not, that you're against me. But the fascinating part, right, is that, we're all struggling in different ways. I mean, the financial situation in the U.S. is not great. It's getting worse. I mean, millions of people have been kicked off of healthcare. It's getting worse and worse every day. We're in all of these wars, needlessly, that are causing prices to go up. But when you are part of a family, which is kind of what's being offered, right? You can forgive a lot of that, because losing your connection to your family is not an option, right? Does that help? Okay. So this is interesting because we can see over time from 2021 to 2025 how things are changing and shifting. So you might notice how there's this line about, see the lime green line? And then see the blue line at the very top that stands above the rest? So the blame, right, through 4 years has been, it's all coming from the left. But what we're starting to see is that maybe it's also coming from the right, which is that green line. Maybe that's part of what's dividing us too. So all to say that we're able to identify fissures and areas where we can deepen conversations based on what people are actually telling us. But again, you'll notice the pink here. I think I have to go to the pink here. This is not quite right, but is healthcare. So even though it is such a pressing issue, I mean, I literally don't talk to anybody who hasn't had an experience with healthcare. It's not the primary driver. And so we're able to show what is really, really groundbreaking, to reorient how to build a pro-democracy movement in this country that's much, much different than the analysis that we've had before. So we also hear that people living in our places of the world are fixed, they're ideologically fixed, they're irredeemable, and they're unworthy of investment, right? And so it's not worth our time to have these conversations with those people. Now, part of the problem, I think, well, I know, is that movement organizing has become such an expedient practice. We're not really in the business of building relationships. We're in the business of winning outcomes. And so you'll get somebody knocking at your door. Often they have a script. Maybe they'll ask you, how would you rank yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 based on this issue? And then they leave, or they ask you again, did I change your mind? Then they leave, and you don't see them again till another election cycle. That's mobilization. That's not organizing. And what we're able to show is that through this program, I should say our program operates daily. So everyone who participates does it from the safety of their own home. And it happens, with frequency, so you can learn the practice and you can unlearn a lot of the behaviors that we all kind of have. We all live in the same world. We operate in these binaries. It's very hard for progressive folks at the very beginning to not just have a snap to judgment, or I want to just tell this person they're wrong, rather than really learning how to have open-ended, deep, and curious conversations to understand what's driving it. A lot of people that text with us say they come from urban areas predominantly, and they'll say, I didn't understand. What do you mean you didn't have a what do you mean you don't have a hospital within 100 miles of you? What do you mean your convenience store is also your grocery store? What do you mean there's no transportation system? And it starts to illuminate a much deeper issue that we have in this country, which is structural failure. And I will tell you, across the left and across the right, and all areas in between, most Americans believe that we are facing real structural failure. But the antidote to that is not to cast each other as enemies. We're not each other's enemies. Now, there are things that we need to fight together to build the country that we want, but it doesn't happen through division or polarization. So what we're able to show here is how, if you extend, so in a traditional canvassing, you spend 2 to 5 minutes at a door. In a deep canvas, which is where you add a little bit of your own story, you try to make it a little more personal, 10 minutes. And in ours, we extend conversations to the length of their, until they naturally conclude. They are untime bound. And from that, we can see how people actually move from negative to very positive, which is really astounding.
On what?
So their attitudes about you as a person, and their attitudes about the issues that you're talking about. They move from being very, very hostile, F you sometimes, or you're wrong, or all immigrants are bad, or whatever the issue might be, right? Going from very negative to neutral, then to positive. So they begin saying things like, this has been incredibly valuable. I had no idea we had so much in common. I guess I hadn't thought of it that way, right? It opens a door and it provides an on-ramp to build a bigger movement that is actually inclusive instead of just claiming to be.
I have a question. So you're not just listening, you're also expressing your feelings, your philosophy, your opinion to some extent.
So there's an arc. What I will say is it's all about the approach. One of the things that we provide a 64-page searchable narrative guide to help people learn how to navigate conversations across any issue that people say, anything that they name. So an example, and this is, I've had this happen. Adrienne, it's all about the Black people. That's why our country is so divided. And I will say, what's your name? Yeah. Alberto? Roberto. Roberto, that's really interesting. Would you mind sharing with me when you first started developing your ideas around race? Where were you living? What did life look like? What influences did you have? Were there moments that reinforced the beliefs that you hold? And have you had moments that contradicted that? And how did you reconcile those? Right? So it's things like that. Another example, this is, I was at a door in Nampa a couple years ago, and I was talking to a guy. He had a bunch of Trump flags, and it was very clear what his political views were. And I said, hey, I just want to talk to you because it seems like our country is really polarized and more divided than it's ever been. And he says, well, yeah. How long do you think it's going to be for Biden to get kicked out and for Trump to get reinstated that he will be able to fix everything that's been broken? And I said, well, I don't agree. I have grave, grave concerns about many of the policies during that administration. And he said, well, it was the election. The election was stolen. That's what's happening. And it was all because of those mail-in ballots. And I said, okay, well, let me ask you some questions. So I have a lot of friends who have disabilities. And for many of them, the only way that they're able to vote is through mail-in voting. Well, no. I mean, those people should be able to vote, right? And I said, okay, well, we live in an agricultural community, and I don't know if you've ever been on a farm or worked on a farm, but there's a crisis every moment, right? And you don't always get to leave. And the cows certainly don't milk themselves, right? So what about somebody who wants to ensure that their voice counts? And so to do that, they cast a mail-in ballot. Well, no, those people. Okay, well, what about somebody who is reliant on childcare, and for some reason their childcare falls through that day? Well, no, those people. Nursing homes, and just kept listing, people who have jobs that take them out of town, long haul truckers, right? Kept listing these. And he said, well, no, all those people. And he said, and also, people who are serving overseas, they should be able to cast their votes by mail. I said, okay, cool. That sounds like an awful lot of people who would need a lot of exceptions to the rule that you're proposing. How do you think we could work that out to make sure that elections are actually safer, more accurate, and more fair? And he kind of stopped and he said, well, I guess I'd never thought of it that way. I guess we do have to have mail-in voting. It's a lot about the approach, right? Because I'm not going to win. I'm never going to convince anybody to change their mind. In fact, think to yourselves, when's the last time you changed your mind about something really important? Was it because somebody told you they were right? Was it because they presented you with a lot of facts and figures? What was it? It was relational, probably. You trusted somebody, and then you were able to hear them, and you felt like you could be in a conversation where you could freely express your opinions and maybe even question them for the first time. That's much more of the kind of approach that we take. And it takes a lot for people to learn that because we're not conditioned to be able to do that in that kind of way. But it's absolutely transformational. And it also has not just for the people that are changing, right, that we're talking to, but for the people who are doing the outreach. Yeah.
So you kind of identified that you both had similar goals to have elections that were fair, representative, and so forth. And I thought that approach. But what do you do when you have somebody who doesn't think you have the right to exist? Because that's what we're dealing with in this state right now.
Yeah.
So what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think the messenger matters, right? There are many, many folks of color who do not text with us because it's very triggering for them. I will tell you that when we developed this program, it was women of color across the country who said, thank you for actually being a white person doing this work in a way that's not performative, because it's not safe for me to have those conversations, right? But as a white woman, as a white man, there's a way that you could have those kind of conversations about immigration, about, trans, LGBT, about people who are very much viewed that way, right? In a different way. And that really lead people to reconsider, because it's about the messenger. There's so much more to unpack on that, but I hope that's a little bit of a, yeah. Let me share an example of a woman who was texting with us, because it's having this real impact on people just learning how to do it. We do offer this 64-page guide, but then we also tell people use it until you don't need it. They're crutches, right? We want you to be able to throw it away, because this becomes so instinctive that you no longer need it again. So we had a texter, and our goal is we don't want to keep people in the program. We want to train them, give them the practice, and then now go do it in your own community. And she said, I was working the polls, and I had this guy come in, and he said, I don't even know why any of us are here. There's a long line. I don't know why any of us are even here, right? The election is not going to be fair. This is all rigged. I don't even know why we're wasting our time. And Aaron at the time said, okay, took a deep breath. What if I were to approach this situation like I were texting him? She walked over to him and she said, sir, has anyone ever explained this process to you? No. So she walks him through every step of what will happen. Then she introduced him to every person that was working the polls that day, told a bit about them, and also what they had given up to be able to be there. They won't be able to tuck their kids in tonight, whatever the circumstance were, because that's how much they care about making sure that your vote counts. And he just took this pause and said, thank you. And then he went back out to the crowd and he said, folks, I just have to tell you that this nice young lady just walked me through the entire process. Now, I don't know if election's going to be fair everywhere. I cannot guarantee that. I cannot tell you that. But I can guarantee you this. Here, today, you can trust that our votes are going to count. Share another story. Recently, this is age creeping up on me. I'm looking at Steph, who was there for part of this. We had held a rural democracy summit in Boise. Now, a year prior, or 8 months prior or so, we had a funder come to town, and I'd been talking with them for a long time. She knew our work. I'd sent her, oh my God, how much more do I have to write to send you to explain to you what we do? And I thought, let's just go. So we got in my car and we drove. We drove parts of rural Idaho, and we happened upon this grocery store. It was like from the 1940s, old grocery store in Notice, Idaho. Has anybody ever been to Notice, Idaho? Okay, so it's like 200, 300 people maybe. And out front, the couple was selling watermelon, corn, and Confederate flags. And I said, we're going there. And her eyes kind of widened, And so I went in, I introduced myself and my colleague, and he said, well, I'm guessing that we're on different ends of the political spectrum. I said, well, maybe. Let's find out. And so we began talking. We talked about healthcare. We talked about the issues facing his community. So many young people leaving. The regulations that had been imposed that didn't make any sense because they were just sort of bureaucratic, that were causing all of this farmland to be unsustainable for families that had worked that land for generations. And so big ag was coming in. He talked about his fear that fights used to be solved with fists, and now they were being solved with guns and knives. He talked about his fear about another Ruby Ridge, speaking particularly about Ammon Bundy, right? And so as we began to leave, I said, Randy, can you tell my friend what's going to happen if I go to start my car right now and it won't start? He looked at me like super confused, and he said, well, yeah, I'm going to call my buddy up the road. He's a mechanic. We're going to get him on down here, and he'll figure out what's going on. And don't you worry, we'll get you on your way. And I wanted her to see that because that's the other side, right? Is that we cast people as so irredeemable, and yet we're still human beings. And if we can't learn how to humanize each other and to recognize that, then we're getting something very wrong. So 8 months later, we held this democracy summit, and we brought in 15 national leaders across the country, like people who run like the biggest organizations, right? And I thought, we're doing the same thing. So I chartered a bus and I took them, and we went to go visit Randy. And Steph and her team was there filming it. And, he was excited to see us. He was like, gosh, I wish I'd known, I would have dressed a little better, And so as we talked to him for like an hour and a half, right? And towards the end, I said, Randy, would you mind showing my friends the Confederate flags that you were selling the last time I was here? And he hung his head and he said, no, I can't. Because ever since your last visit, we don't sell those anymore.
What was it that shifted his thinking?
Because I was very clear about my beliefs and very honest about who I am. And the fact that he felt heard, seen, and valued caused him to reconsider his own behavior. And that's the piece that we're missing, right? I'm never going to convince you because I think I'm right. I'm never going to convince you because I'm arguing with you. We have to give people the space and grace to be able to move. And when we do that, I'm not saying it happens every time. But what I'm saying is that most often we never extend that kind of opportunity for people to have a transformational moment. And that's on us. Yeah.
In that original visit, were the Confederate flags discussed?
Oh, yeah. And also I told him, I consider myself left of liberal, right? I was probably way too liberal. In fact, I know I was way too liberal for the center, right? But I've led protests, getting Idahoans arrested at the state capitol, trying to cast visibility, on the work that's happening here and the voices. So yes, I'm very clear. And so I had a lot of questions, but I had questions, not answers, right? So I'll just show you a couple more of these and then we can chat. So anyway, this is really staggering because what people across the country in movement work say is we're not movable. People living in our area of the world or in the country are not movable. We're not worth it. And unfortunately, even though we don't all maybe in this room have the same belief system, it impacts us greatly. It impacts us because we don't get the money, we don't get the resources. We are in a defensive mode every single year when the legislature comes to town. We are not introducing legislation that would radically change and improve people's lives. Constantly in defense, right? So it all impacts all of us. Now, let me show you this, because I was telling you about deep canvas, right? But the greatest thing, the greatest success that's reported is people move 8 to 10 points on an issue. I would love to see that bear out in elections, right? Because there's it's mostly driven from philanthropy and researchers who are very focused on proving the success of anything that they do. We can now show that over 5 years of doing this work, not an 8 to 10 issue shift, but a 32.7% attitudinal shift from going from very hostile to very positive. And that's game changing because it disproves everything that's ever been said about communities like ours, people in Georgia, people in Tennessee, people in Kentucky, people in North Carolina. And so I hope, as Idahoans, we've always been an organization that is yours and for you. We should be really proud about the kinds of organizing, especially as we sit in this incredible building and the legacy and the history of the Wassmuth Center for what we're able to do and generate from this state that is really, really game-changing when it comes to how to form and realign national movements in a way that builds this bigger we that everyone always talks about. Yeah, I mean, so here are just a couple of the things that people say, like, wow, no, this was really helpful. I really appreciated having this kind of conversation with you. Things that you would not expect. And, some of you'll get all of these, but some of the participants, what they say, right, about how this has really transformed their thinking and their ability to communicate across difference. And then I think, yeah, we'll just end that there. But yeah, I mean, it's a huge opportunity. Yes.
So this is an outreach to a very conservative population here. What about to a very progressive population?
Well, our theory is that if you can have conversations across extreme difference to the degree that we've built this program to do, you can have it with anyone. Right? So instead of what typically
By doing it to that
to the progressive community,
society.
that's all they do. That's the only organizing that's happening. So even when you hear about bridging or building work, maybe, they're still identifying people that they believe are persuadable. They're not talking to people who have wildly divergent ideas. That makes this it is the only thing in the country that operates from that perspective. That if we can learn how to have conversations across extreme difference, then you are more than equipped to do it with people in the middle, and certainly on people who are more aligned with you. Yeah. I feel like there are a lot of questions, so maybe should we open it up for questions at this point? And you please keep track of time because I'm terrible at it. Okay. Yeah.
So that 32.7% shift that you've seen, what are you measuring? Is that your conversations with people?
Yes.
And how the nature of them has changed?
Yes. Well, and what they declare, right? So one of the unique things about this is that because it's a text, everything is downloaded verbatim. So we can do extreme narrative analysis on the kinds of words that people use, what they actually say, and how they talk about issues. So it is not speculative at all. It's not a poll. It's not a survey. It's directly what people tell us. So they may change their opinion certainly they change their opinion on who is delivering the message. From "you are my enemy" to "I've actually found I have a lot of respect for you." People often ask, can we meet together in person? Right? They want to deepen those relationships. But it's also on issues, right? So that, that chart with all of the lines, the crazy lines that are hard to read, how are people changing their minds about things as they're seeing things unfold in the way that they are? How is somebody who was very much like, I just want all of the immigrants gone, seeing what's happening with ICE today and shifting their opinions? Where are the fissures, and what kinds of conversations could we be having to deepen and pull at those threads to start making real intervention? Because, so much of this is also propagated through online, through media, television, all of it is feeding. It's like this beast that we all keep feeding with rhetoric. And so this is a powerful intervention to stop that.
So it's not like that 32.7%, like all of a sudden we have a whole bunch more Democratic legislators in this state, because 32.7% of people that completely gone to the other side say it's a gradual getting to open up to this issue, that issue a little bit, and sort of.
Yeah, so this, that chart was taken, that's from all of the states. So it's not just Idaho, it's across the board. Now, I will say, I believe that, no party is going to save us. I do not believe that the Democratic Party is going to save us either. There are vast distinctions between the two. at this juncture. But unless we build a movement comprised of regular American people across the country who are committed to each other and the promise of building a different kind of future, we will never build and harness the kind of power we need to hold all politicians to account.
I was just using that as a proxy for
Yeah.
a noticing the shift.
Yeah. But I mean, again, it's really game changing because there hasn't ever been this kind of data to show before. And it's proving, that first of all, yeah, people are changeable. People are capable of transformation. It's not that they're not capable of that. It's that they're lacking an invitation. The first thing we always hear this. No one from your side has ever reached out to ask me what I think or feel before. Many people from rural places will say, I've never talked to a rural person before in my life. I'm shocked about the realities that they are facing. I had no idea. We have to be able to see each other to understand our pain. It doesn't have to be the same pain, but we have to be able to do that to humanize each other, to find our common ground and recognize that we are in a shared struggle. And it is a real struggle. Democracy is hanging by a thread. We have this moment and we may not get another. And so I never take lightly what's at stake in this moment or how important organizing and all of us doing this is. But I do think that where we go will be shaped by every conversation we either have or every conversation we choose not to have because it's just too uncomfortable. And there are a lot of litmus tests that exist on both the left and the right. But for the left, which is where I primarily organize, if every single person is not woke enough, if they don't check every single box, then there's no room for you in our movement. That's not organizing. Organizing is when you meet people where they are, you establish commonality, and you are willing to walk with them on a journey of transformation. Mobilizing is when you show up at a door and you say, I need something from you. I need you to vote a different way. I need you to vote on this issue. I need you to vote for a candidate. Thank you very much. Never to be seen again. Both are necessary, but one is it's how we repair the fabric of who we are as a people that will allow us to mobilize and harness that energy to create the change that we need. But part of what is happening in this country is the tragic breaking. The breaking that we all feel in our daily lives. The breaking that we feel in our communities. The breaking that we feel about who is safe and who is not safe. Who we can talk to, who's an ally, who's not. Who's for me, who's against me. And I get it. But that change has to start happening with each and every one of us. Nothing out there is going to fix the problems that we have, right? And I know it seems squishy, but every great movement that's defeated authoritarianism in the world has been rooted in compassion and love. The March of a Million Hearts, right? Communities coming together. Look at Minneapolis. I don't need to know everything about you, but I'm going to stand shoulder to shoulder with you. I talked with a woman this week who was telling me stories about ICE agents coming for children. And so how many people have pulled their kids out of schooling to enroll in online schooling because it's just not safe. But you know what the teachers are doing? The teachers are, well, I should say that ICE is also issuing fake subpoenas that are badly written, to show up at a court date, right? So that they can target more effectively these families. So you know what the teachers are doing? They are filing foster parent papering, right? Foster care papers, to be able to be the legal guardian of these young kids. That's community. That's hearing what really matters to people and showing up in powerful ways and doing everything that we can as individuals to create the world that we envision and want so desperately and deserve, all of us. Wherever we came from, wherever we've been, we have to be able to provide off-ramps. And I'm not saying there aren't lines. I have lines, you have lines about who and who not. But I'm telling you, the vast majority of us have more in common. The vast majority of us have a peanut butter and jelly story. And we have to find those stories to be able to build in a different way. And it will not happen if we fail to see each other as human beings, as people worthy of dignity and care and respect. And that doesn't mean I agree with anything that is happening in this administration. But it does mean that I deeply, deeply, deeply still believe in the power of the human heart and the power of people to come together. It is the only thing that has ever changed the course of history. You know, we didn't get civil rights in this country because any administration ever wanted to give them up. We got it because millions of people came together, rose up, built the kind of people power that was needed to wield it. And that is this moment. It is the moment that is required to all of us, and it can seem really large and really daunting, and I know it can seem hard. But remember, it starts with us. It starts with every single action that we take every single day. And it's hard. You know, the folks that we put through training, we ask people to stay and do the training for at least 6 weeks because it takes a long time to unlearn the practices that we've all been, you know, we're all products of our environment. And we need to be honest about that. But then we also need to be equally honest about challenging them and how we decide that we're going to live in this moment, because there's just simply too much at stake for all of us and for generations to come.
How are you going to get the young people involved? I commend Tom for bringing his children there, but look at the age of a lot of us. We were there at the civil rights day. We were there. A lot of young people have really no sense of issue. They the only presidents they've known have been the 2 Trumps and Biden. How do we get those young people involved? Even a demonstration that at the Capitol here, it was a lot of the people our age, you know, that seemed to be there.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you, and it's not easy. There is no one way. You know, there is no one movement. We've all got to find our niche and do what we can. I would say the Wassmuth Center does the best programming in the state of reaching young people and giving them the opportunity to challenge some of those ideas. But, you know, we need to be creative and stop seeking outside of ourselves for who's going to deliver the answer, and start being creative about how are we going to create the answer in the communities that we have. So find your people. Build your community, one conversation at a time, you know, to create the programs that you think could actually do that. Because we're going to need young people. We're going to need people of every age. You know, it's going to take all of us. And young people are looking to us too, you know, because much of this they didn't create. And so how are we going to rise to that moment?
I just want to answer your question with something that at the Wassmuth Center we do often is bring students in from schools all in the area and give them tours. And you know, we can't get overly political, otherwise they might stop coming. Right. But we can certainly share our emotional reaction to many of the things that are outside on the wall. We can up in this room, the educators that are part of this team take kids through exercises that help them see how being inclusive, it being a part of, not excluding others, can really be an important and a beneficial part of their lives. So I think that might answer your question. That's one of the things.
Yeah, I just know there's a lot of, especially the young men feel disenfranchised, they feel kind of angry, no hope of buying a home, you know, they're looking at all these things.
We don't have a
Press-
program for incels.
Pardon me?
We don't have a program for incels.
No, absolutely.
But I think the other thing is that we have to create a movement where everyone feels welcome and like they can contribute. And that means everyone, right? Everyone. We're working with Rich Logis, who, as maybe some of you were at a presentation I did with him in Boise recently, he founded Leaving MAGA. Because when oh my gosh, after one of the school shootings, he had this epiphany, like, I cannot be a part of this anymore. And he wrote a long apology to everyone. And it was published in the New York Times. And then people started coming to him, flooding him with, I'm trying to leave too. Can you help me? No one's off the table. It's going to take all of us in a lot of different kinds of ways to do that and reach all the people that we need.
I think kind of, I don't know if I need that, but in the same, kind of in the same line of trying to reach younger people, I work at Boise State Public Radio. And as you know, maybe you don't know, but all of our supporters, or many of our supporters, are an older demographic. And we want to stick around. So that's been something that I've been working on just this year, but also trying to like partner with different groups like this to kind of get out there and say like, hey, where are those people? How can I reach those kids? And, you know, we've been trying to reach out to history professors or social sciences teachers and invite them either to listen to our the newsletter that we have about the legislator, just to kind of help them, or start inviting them to do things at the station. So I think maybe going out there and reaching out, libraries, the Wassmuth Center, volunteering at places. And I think, I don't know if anyone's familiar with Osher, but Osher also does some things where they'll have groups and they'll invite kids from the high schools around to do those things. So I think people are trying to do it. And I think my challenge is putting all those groups together so that we are all on the same page and use the same resources.
I would say start with asking. Don't assume why they're not getting engaged. Don't assume what they need. You know, form a big session, like get a space, invite them in and say, hey, we want to come together and hear from you. What do you need? What do you need from us? What would make these spaces more friendly to you? How can we be a conduit? You know, it's going to be a million different things. The thing is that they don't have to be the same, but we have to be united in our approach. I'm also out of time, but I'm available. And I just want to, because I want to be respectful of your time. I also want to really, really thank Jess and Jocelyn and the entire team at the Wassmuth Center. This place is like a home to me. And I'm so proud and impressed of all the work that you are doing. It is absolutely phenomenal. So please continue to support the programming. Keep coming up. Keep telling people that I went to this thing, you know, and encouraging them, because your excitement about it will be encouraging and inspire encouragement and participation too. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.